The U.S. military is the largest consumer of hydrocarbons of any organization in the world. To stay strong and secure the future, it must transition to renewable and resilient energy sources. That's why AFWERX is launching the Reimagining Energy for the DoD Challenge, an open innovation crowdsourcing effort in search of transformative technologies that will power our collective future and innovative companies in the U.S. and allied countries that can deliver them to the Department of Defense. We are seeking practical solutions that can be deployed today and also future off-world moonshots to create the future of resilient energy production, transmission use, and storage. The innovation catalyst for the U.S. Air Force, AFWERX helps teams turn their ideas into real-world solutions. Anyone with an innovative concept has the chance to land a lucrative government contract and help re-energize America. AFWERX aims to supercharge the innovation ecosystem in order to map, connect, and accelerate tomorrow's green energy industry. From new platforms of energy access to tomorrow's vision of infinite supply. From scaling smart adoption of smarter grids to powering any device anywhere without a wire. Ideas surfaced in this challenge will illuminate a new energy architecture and help save our planet in the process. Will you join us? The Reimagining Energy for the DoD Challenge is open until October 1st. Please share this video and submit your ideas to afworkschallenge.com/energy.
Hello, Energy Files, and welcome. Thanks to all of you for joining this AFWERX Challenge webinar today. We're pleased to be joined today by many impressive applicants and innovators who are up for this critically important challenge of creating an energy force for the future. The session is being recorded in full, just to let you know. And from this challenge, we're really aiming to put the DoD and the Air Force on your radar as a true partner to accelerate your game-changing energy solutions to meet these powerful market opportunities, including with the Air Force. My name is Jackie Dietrich. I'm from Establish, a team that's contracted by AFWERX to connect high potential startups to business opportunities within the Air Force, and I'll be helping to run the show today. We'll go over a plan for the webinar and everything we're planning to accomplish in a moment. But first, for a proper welcome, we'd like to introduce you to the director of AFWERX and the leadership team that's responsible for creating this reputation that the Air Force has earned as one of the most innovative organizations in the world. Colonel Diller, over to you.
Super, thanks so much, Jackie. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone here. Thanks very much to you and your team for the fantastic work, the super outreach that you've done to bring what I understand to be some 300 companies that we have already into this market space. So thanks for that. Thanks to the great team that we have with our friends, you can see at DARPA, but in particular with the folks in AFWERX who are the touch points to our operators, the folks that understand where we are really creating challenges to our future force and where there's opportunity for so much innovation to make sure that we have ways of operating in some various environments without being 100% dependent on the logistics networks associated with petroleum-based energy. And so I really am excited about the opportunity here. This is one of our first, and what I think will probably be AFWERX, the biggest challenge that we've done so far. And under this slightly new approach to AFWERX, where we have kind of 3 different experiments that have come together here. And it's 3 experiments that I think are very important for our teammates out there in industry and the investors to understand that we are starting new ways of trying to do the outreach, trying to bring in those great technologies into our force, but we're doing it in really close collaboration with different teammates in our Air Force. Those teammates being folks like AFWERX, but across what has been AFWERX for years now, bringing in our different Spark cell networks, our Spark tank work that we've been doing, working across our major commands so that we're finding the right user with that right technology that's out there. And then very importantly, finding the right company and finding the right path that the company's technology comes in to our larger Air Force. And so we have that AF Ventures piece where we'll begin different approaches to outreach, opportunities for contracts for small businesses, opportunities eventually for contracts for large businesses, the great ideas of our airmen through Spark, and then through Prime. Is there a chance that there is a entirely new sector in the energy market that the Air Force can help catalyze and bring in as a major program for our Air Force to create a new approach to our energy independence in the Air Force? So great work so far with the team that has been pulling this challenge together. Thanks so much to the industry partners that are out there. Really excited to hear the feedback. What can we do in AFWERX to be a better partner for you, a better partner for your investors? And getting that feedback all the way through is going to be critically important. I'm very excited about the technologies that are going to come out of this challenge, and very excited for the new partnerships that are created here. So with that, many thanks to all of you, and I'll hand it back over to Jackie for the rest of our lineup.
Thanks, Colonel Deller. It's exciting to see how the AFWERX team is reimagining innovation and the partner supplier network for the Air Force and really all of government. So sky's the limit. Thanks for that awesome background and inspiring us to think big this morning. We'll be hearing from more of the AFWERX team today too, who can talk more about some of those exciting initiatives to make all of that a reality. But today we're here really to get down to brass tacks with innovators in the arena of energy. If you're here, it's because you've proposed solutions for this new energy future within one of the world's largest innovation markets, and that's the Air Force and the DoD. So just a quick overview of our action plan and what you can expect from our short time together. First, we want to give you an update on the AFWERX challenges and the reimagining energy effort. So you'll be hearing from the leaders that are working behind the scenes there. We'll have about 30 minutes to ask questions and get insights directly from government leaders that are working across each of the energy focus areas. So this is where you'll want to have your questions teed up for really what they're looking for in potential solutions for this challenge area. Then we're going to dive deep. We'll have up to an hour with two of the Air Force innovation leads who can answer questions about both the challenge process and funding programs that are helping these new entrants get funding to do feasibility tests and trial runs with the Air Force and DoD customers in the hopes that we can help to accelerate the transition of some of these commercial technologies across these market areas. Then we'll really be just wrapping it up with some of the information and reminders to you that you will have an opportunity to refine your proposal for this energy challenge based on what you've heard today. And that will be up until October 15th as an update already from the slide in the video that you just saw. So this is all meant to give you the information that you need for that refinement and to have the very best shot possible at becoming a solution provider to this immense challenge area. So for today's sessions throughout this next hour and 45 minutes, you can post your comments in the Q&A. We have teams standing by to help us stay organized and get answers to as many of those questions as possible. Like I said, we are recording this event. If there's information that's presented on slides, well, we'll see that we can make those available. But we'll be selecting as many questions as possible throughout the panel discussions, and as well as posting links to other information and helpful resources. So now I want to take a moment to introduce you to the innovation lead from the AFWERX Vegas Hub and our resident expert in AFWERX on challenges, who will give us kind of a 2-minute warm-up. Heather Wild-Renzi, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Jackie. So I wanted to just quickly go over what the AFWERX challenge process is. Now, everyone on this call, you were invited because you've already submitted to the AFWERX challenge open call, but I wanted to just quickly show you what that step in the process is. So here you go. So the overall AFWERX challenge process is like this. So before that open challenge, we had the challenge definition workshop, and we do this for all of our challenges. In that challenge definition workshop, we gather subject matter experts together for some using our advanced facilitation techniques in a 2-day face-to-face or virtual challenge definition workshop, and we gather industry, academia, and government together to define a challenge and formulate an actionable challenge definition statement that is marketable to industry. Then we open that challenge, which is what you were called to. You responded to that. That's a crowdsourcing campaign open to innovators from industry, academia, and the government who have full or partial solutions to solve that problem that we're asking for. And that is open, as we mentioned, to October 15th. And then once that closes, then we have evaluators from the government side, stakeholders and subject matter experts that will select those innovators to be invited to a showcase. And that showcase event will be a 1 or 2 day virtual or in-person event, depending on when it happens, that brings together those people that have been selected from our open challenge and potential government customers so that they can discuss those solutions. And then from that showcase, more people are selected to potentially go to a contract phase. And once that contracting phase occurs, like for prototyping, we then measure the impact that that has had over time, so that we can understand how this whole process from the challenge definition workshop all the way through prototyping has affected the needs of the warfighter. And as of September of this year, we've launched 24 challenges. We've awarded 35 million in contract and investments, and we've generated, actually that number's gone up now. It's near 5,000 solution submissions. And we've streamlined arriving at a contract to only 24 weeks on average. And it was something like 560 weeks. Somebody can, so we've really helped that process get faster. So with that, Jackie, I will hand it back to you.
Some impressive results. Heather, you'll be answering questions that come through Q&A where appropriate today. But for our attendees, we'll also be bringing Heather back to answer your questions specific to the AFWERX challenge process. If you have evaluation questions, how all of that will work, Heather, you'll be back at the top of the hour to help out with that.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Now for an electrifying introduction to the Energy Challenge and AFWERX, I want to turn it over to Colonel B.B. Brisbois with AFWERX.
Hey, thank you, Jackie. Really appreciate it. And let me first start by saying thank you to the amazing team that has put this whole event together and brought this group together today. My team in particular, a lot of hard work behind the scenes, a lot of hard work from the AFWERX group behind the scenes. And then finally to all of you, the companies, the 260 plus, I think that we have online here today. Wow, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to get your submissions in early and joining us on this journey as we try to reimagine energy for the DoD. So my job here today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my organization, tell you why we exist and what our purpose is, and then I will give you a little bit of what I've seen, just reviewing the proposals that are online right now. What I think is good, what could be a little better, a little advice, and then I'm also going to jump into the panels as well and talk there. So backing up, my organization, AFWERX, Air Force Warfighter Integration Capability. That's a lot of words, and if you've heard of Army Futures Command or MCCITIC in the Marines, we're all trying to do the same thing, which is how do we bring the future faster to the Department of Defense, right? And here's the key problem. Our enemies or competitors have looked at the way, the American way of war and have said, we can create denial zones. We can use the proliferation of technology to ensure that you don't have the ability to project power at a time and place of your choosing, right? And that's been something that's been our competitive advantage since the end of World War II is that we did have the ability to project power anywhere on the earth anytime we wanted to, right? And has been cut into. Our previous chief of staff looked at the trend lines. His name was General Goldfein. He just left the office a month ago. And he said, you know, I am leaving an Air Force that is less capable than the one I took over from a competitive advantage standpoint. And no leader of any organization wants to leave an organization worse than we've already found it. And so early on, he said, we've got to reverse these trend lines and we've got to do some things differently than we have in the past. And starting with that is, I've got to break down the silos within the Air Force, within the fighter community and the bomber community and the space community. I've got to bring all of them together under one roof, and we've got to have a common theory of victory, so that when I go talk to one of those groups, I don't hear, this is how we're going to achieve our objectives in 2030 and beyond. And then I go talk to a separate group and I hear a completely different story, right? Using different ways and means to achieve those ends. They all need to be brought together, especially in times of economic austerity, which is, you know, if you look at the amount of disposal or the ability for the defense budget to rise, it's really not there in the budget, right? At best, it will stay steady, and more than likely, it will go down by some percentage. We've seen tremendous increases since the early 2000s and the kickoff of Iraq and Afghanistan. But at some point, those have to level off and even come down in some ways. And so we're facing those economic challenges while we're facing competitors who are using technology to eat into our competitive advantage, and we've got to find a new way of doing business. And so my organization was born, AFWERX, out of kind of that problem set. And the big thought was to do things differently. One, we needed a theory of victory, a combined theory of victory of how we were going to compete in 2030 and beyond, that went across bombers, fighters, space, cyber, rescue, special operations. Everybody on the same page, right? And once you have that, then let's get capability development and let's prioritize it and let's put acquisitions behind that theory of victory and start to align our priorities and our capability development together. And then finally, you got to go out and find new technologies, and you got to take the revolution that's happening in Silicon Valley across the world, the digital revolution, right? And we've got to bring that into the Air Force, and we've got to do that faster. And so having a concept, right, a theory of victory, acquisitions, and technology. Secretary Esper will tell you that those are the three things that are required to have innovation. My team in particular is responsible for we call it disruptive technology. And so we have operators that work with us that are, no kidding, just came out of the field. They're in the Pentagon and hey, we need evolutionary improvements on my F-15 fighter or my B-52 bomber needs a new radar. We've got that group and they're working the evolutionary, the tonight and tomorrow's fight. We have cross-functional teams that are working the 5 to 7 year outlook, more of an evolutionary, bordering on kind of revolutionary, but they're really still within what's kind of relevant right now and how can we expand our capabilities with things that are real. And then my group is aligned with OSD R&E. If you're familiar with the 11 technology focus areas that they've said, if the DoD is going to improve its competitiveness, it's things like artificial intelligence, quantum, biotechnologies, microelectronics, the list goes on, right? It's all the standards. We've loosely aligned to that, and we are looking at ways in which we can take our normal capabilities and revolutionize them, disrupt them, right? And so when AFWERX came to us and said, we'd like you to sponsor a challenge, energy was the one that jumped out at us immediately of an area that needed to be disrupted. Because our enemies certainly are looking at it and saying, you can't generate combat power if you can't move fossil fuel, POL is what we call it, around the theater, right? If you can't move gas and fuel forward, you can't fuel your fighters, you can't fuel your trucks, and you just can't generate combat power. And so we looked at this, and then on the commercial side, this is an industry that is being disrupted right now heavily, right? And so it's a perfect marriage of, we see the disruption happening on the commercial side, and we know we've got a military problem set that goes alongside of it. And so now we're looking for the technologies. And we use a standard called TMRO. It came out of some business schools. Many of you may have heard of it. It's technology. In the business world, they call it market. We call it mission. Resources, and then organizational adoption capacity. And TMRO is kind of how we evaluate disruptive technologies inside of our team. And what gets brought forward. And with that, I'll transition to a little bit of what I've seen in the submissions that I've seen so far, and what I think of them and how they align to kind of that TMRO model that I keep in the back of my mind. So, my bias is big ideas. I am in the disruption side of the house. And so that's what I'm looking for. We're certainly also looking for the evolutionary, but really, even in those evolutionary, we want big ideas. Like, how is this going to change the way we do energy right now, or maneuver energy, if you want to call it that. There's lots of different terms, but the idea being, we want to reimagine, right? That's the title of this, and that's really what we want to do. Exactly. So, I would say, if you're going to go back and look at your submissions, go big, right? Like, I want to hear big ideas. Number two, make sure your submissions are tailored to the actual focus area. Let's, ensure that you have to understand that the people that are reading these are government people. They have some were chosen, the evaluators were chosen because of their military experience. Others were chosen because of their scientific backgrounds. Others we've chosen them for a variety of reasons, because we want different perspectives to look at these, and they're not all going to be able to understand that you submitted it in this category, but if it's not tightly aligned to it, they're going to struggle with it. So I'd make tight alignment to the focus area, I guess, is my point there. And then don't be too technical, right? There's a happy balance between not being technical enough, where you just throw out key terms and it's vaporware, right? And it all sounds great, but we really can't judge it. And then it's too technical, and really you need a PhD to understand what you're talking about, right? There's a fine balance between those two, and that's, those are the submissions that stick out. When you nail that, I think those really stick out. Lots of talk on artificial intelligence and machine learning. I've gotten to spend the last 2 years, studying artificial intelligence. As I said, it's one of our focus areas. And what I'm looking for in those submissions, when I see it, to find out if you're using it as just a term, or if you actually really do know, right? Like, I look for, how do you train your algorithms? Put that in your submission, right? Where are your data sets coming from? How large are your data sets? How often are they being revisited? How are you verifying that your algorithms actually do what you say they do? All of those things will, again, if you can put that in plain English and explain it to us, your submission goes a lot further than somebody that just says, I'm using artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? Because that's actually really hard to do, and it really comes down to the data in a lot of ways. And then, also we want to hear what your challenge is, and what's the hardest part that you've got to do to go from where we are today to actually fielding a system. And in most cases, it's not just money, right? If just money could solve the problem, we would have solved it already, and we would have gone that route. Usually it's we need to solve this and this and this, and there's the timeline, here's the minor miracle that needs to be resolved, and it's going to, we think it's going to take this much money. Again, focus on the other aspects rather than just telling us how much money it's going to take. And then back to the idea, finally, that, across all the submissions I've seen, I haven't seen as many moonshots, the big ideas that are 15 to 20 years out, as I'd like to. So if you're holding on to one of those for some reason, because you don't think we'd be interested in it, let me tell you, I'm very interested in those. And I have pathways to incubation beyond just SBIR. We have linkages to the labs, we have linkages to DARPA, SCO, all those places that can take these ideas and really run with them, right? And so this is your opportunity to be discovered. We talk about discover, incubate, and accelerate. We're doing the discovery through this. The incubation part is where we're going to go after this. And the really good ideas are going to get accelerated, and we're going to put them into our force of 2030 and beyond. So with that, I'm really looking forward to the panel. I'm looking forward to the discussion with you guys and the questions. And Jackie, back over to you. Thank you.
Quick question: How many applicants applications do you expect to receive for this challenge?
So I've been asking AFWERX and the guys behind the scene the exact same thing. I would say based off of previous challenges, the numbers that we have right now, and the fact that we've opened this internationally, another big kudos to everybody that was able to pull that off. I would say that if we're at 200 plus now, 250 plus now, and that's just the early bird, and usually in the last week, the number doubles. I think we're going to have well over 1,000. It would be, my conservative guess. And so lots and lots of great ideas out there.
And you'll be sticking around to join us for the panel. So
Absolutely.
we're glad for that. And thanks for those words about the big ideas and how they combine with the evolutionary to really, come up with these ideas of moonshots. So this is the moment for all of our attendees to really fire up, get ready for your questions. We're going to start bringing the panelists in now. So there's just a little bit of logistics of getting everyone's video and audio going. But for the next 30 minutes or so, this is really a panel of folks who are here to share more information about what a moonshot looks like. What for the DoD, for the Air Force, how do you gain more insight into those energy focus areas to really understand what the capabilities are that they can offer you in terms of resources. SBIR was brought up. That's America's largest seed fund that's really meant to help get these commercial technologies onto government contract, but there are other opportunities working with labs. There's the STTR program. So all of those are things that we're hoping to touch base on. But this is really about what are the solutions that we're really looking for here in these challenges. So this is about customer discovery. It's an opportunity to ask technology related questions specific to the energy challenge. So those are all welcome in the Zoom chat. We're going to try and keep those relevant to the whole audience, so we can't get super detailed into like a specific proposal necessarily, but we'll really do our best to help you uncover what we're really looking for and prioritizing those questions that can help the broader audience really glean that information. So we may not be able to cover all the questions that are hyper specific to any one solution, but we really want these panelists to be able to share what they know about how things work and what the future could hold. So I'm going to go ahead and go down my list of names. And panelists, if you could just give us about a 30-second or less introduction, super short elevator ride, your name, your organization and role with energy, so that our attendees can really understand your relevant areas of expertise and what they should focus on in the Q&A. So if we could start with Will.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Will Woodward. Like Colonel Brisbois, I am part of the Air Force Warfighting Integration Capability, and I work in the decision analytics or data analytics team. When BB's disruptive tech team comes up with a crazy idea, we're going to try and put a little bit of analytical rigor to that and say, yeah, it matters, and it matters about this much, or that has potential somewhat more than this other thing. Because millions of ideas can sound good, but we've got to be able to, at some level, some initial level, do some prioritization to say for senior decision makers to make, this is what's really worth investing in. So we're going to try and put that quantitative rigor to it. Over.
Great, thanks. How about Francesca? All right, she might not be on just yet, so if she comes back in, we'll be sure and get her introduced. Doug, I see you here.
Yeah, hi, this is
Hey.
Doug Lugino, also from AFWERX, and it's actually so far a good order because as the concepts kind of flow from innovations through decision analytics, kind of comes to our organization. I'm part of the what's called Force Design organization. My particular area is in the infrastructure. And so one of the things we do is we use the tools and the analysis provided by decision analytics to take that kind of more of a integrated look. We look at things like wargaming and campaign analysis, campaign simulations, and we look at the things that really matter. We do some sensitivity analysis. We see things that matter. Won't get too much into the detail, but like BB said earlier, fuel is definitely an area of vulnerability. And as we go through our simulations, red versus blue, we know that that's part of our vulnerabilities. And to the extent that we have great new ideas out there that we can maneuver and launch planes and things without fuel, I think it'll make our job much more capable, much easier. That's it. Over.
Thanks, Doug. And just a reminder to our panelists, if you open up that Q&A, you can scroll through and see some of the questions that are coming across and also in the chat. So if there are questions that you really want to take, please do go ahead and take a look at those and make a note for us, and we'll come back around to that. How about Dan?
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you great.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I'm Daniel Pike. I work in the Air Force Operational Energy Office, which is under the Secretary of the Air Force. And our Assistant Secretary works installations, environment, and energy issues. And so underneath that is both installation energy and operational energy. And operational energy in the Air Force is everything from the flight line up. So ground support equipment that help aircraft get HVAC and power while they're on the ground. And then we also work to see what we can get as far as capability goes out of the $5 billion that we spend each year on jet fuel. And
was that 5 billion with a B?
5 billion with a B, bravo, yep. And so we, if just a 5% increase in operational energy efficiency in the Air Force is $250 million a year that we could use to work on other capabilities and things that we need. And so some of the things we're interested in are advanced propulsion systems, advanced aircraft, and also something we look closely at is what we call cost per effect. How much, not just energy, but how many dollars do we spend to deliver an effect or get information? And if we can work on reducing that cost, we've done probably a good job in the energy space.
Thanks, Dan.
This is Colonel Bartholomew. Can you hear me? Over.
Yeah, we can hear you great. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm sorry, I didn't think you could hear me before. Is it an okay time to do the introduction now?
Yes, please. Go right ahead.
Good. Sorry about that. So I'm Colonel Francesca Bartholomew. I'm the Agile Combat Support Service Corps Function Portfolio Manager. I'm also in the AFWERX in Center 2, but I'm also the co-lead for the Logistics Under Attack cross-functional team. So under ACS, I'm responsible for 5 portfolio areas: research and development, science and technology, test and evaluation, lifecycle management, logistics and sustainment, and installation and mission support, which are the 5 core capabilities of ACS. And then underneath logistics under attack, we have 4 lines of effort there: posturing the force, improved deployment and distribution, mitigating and recovering from enemy attack, and logistics command and control. So it's a pretty wide scope. So in terms of energy requirements, our area of interest and concern and expertise is about new capability technology. What alternatives or opportunities exist for the provision, storage, distribution of energy, both at bases, but primarily at austere locations away from those operating bases and airfields. In support of those developing capabilities, just as one example, flying cars with Agility Prime. There's huge implications for us for concurrent APS portfolio activities inside those core capability areas that I mentioned to deliver not only the referenced new Air Force capabilities, but also the planning and provision of the energy that they require as well. And so we have similar implications for the logistics under attack cross-functional team as all that relates to our lines of effort. Over.
Thanks for calling in. All right, okay, going down the list here, we've got a couple more. Steve.
Hi, Jackie. Steve Monday here. So I'm Steve Monday. I'm a civilian. I work for the Strategic Development Planning and Experimentation Office of the Air Force. We're actually partnered closely with AFWERX, and what we do are basically experiments, but not science experiments like AFRL would do, but really experiments to understand the warfighting value of new technologies. So how do we place new technologies, new concepts, new solutions into an experimental environment to understand the operational value and utility. And this is something that we're working closely with AFWERX. I'm actually embedded within AFWERX. I work on Colonel Brisboy's team, the Innovative Solutions Division of Disruptive Technology, CFT, and we're actively looking for ideas and big ideas, as Bibi said, from which we can experiment and understand whether they're worth further pursuing and eventually accelerating and ramping up our investment. And our goal is really to have a pipeline of opportunities at various stages of maturity. So some big opportunities that maybe take a little bit longer, and even some near-term opportunities that we can get to the field right away. So thank you very much, and I appreciate everyone's participation.
Thanks. Kava, over to you.
Hey, Jackie, can you hear me okay?
Yes, hear you great.
Great. So aloha, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. My name is Kava Amina. I'm from U.S. Indo-Pacific Command J4. Actually had to find a quiet spot outside because the building itself is pretty loud. But again, so what we do here in the Indo-PACOM J4 is focused on logistics and engineering. You know, Colonel Bibi mentioned a little bit about the challenges to get, you know, to get things and people in places and the energy requirements, especially in our AOR. We have something that I think some people are familiar called the Tyranny of Distance. The Indo-Pacific is 52% of the world's surface, and a lot of it is air and a lot of it's water. Unfortunately, that takes a tremendous amount of energy. So whether it be electrons or POL to get things and people from point A to point B. So, you know, really excited about the community here that's come out and all the people that are involved. Ultimately, you know, it's commercial industry that's moving at light pace, you know, light speed, and really it does our best in the Department of Defense to really leverage that and maximize that. So thanks again for the opportunity. You know, really looking forward to discussions today. Over.
That is a real background that the rest of us envy as virtual backgrounds. Wes, over to you.
Thanks, Jackie. Hi, everybody. My name is Wes Martin. I swear I'm calling in from just as a luxurious location as Kava was calling in from, but you'll just have to take my word from it since I don't have video capability. But as I mentioned, my name is Wes Martin. I also am part of the AFWERX team. I'm a team lead for international partnerships. Since this challenge has gone international, I thought it'd be a good idea to bring me in to help with some international perspectives. And what I mean by that is, there is a large implication to a lot of these capabilities as they are developed and matured, not only in terms of where the capability is coming from our industry partners and our entrepreneurs that are based internationally, but also what does that mean in terms of how we, the Air Force specifically, view our allies and partnerships, because a lot of those decisions are based upon some of our energy and infrastructure and logistical type of needs and requirements, to where, you know, some of these new revolutionary and evolutionary type of technologies may allow us to take a look at some of those partnerships and approach them in a different light and different perspective and expand on those types of relationships. So I'm happy to be part of the conversation, and thanks for bringing me in.
Thanks, Wes. And Paul, last but not least.
Hey, thanks, Jackie. I'm Paul Promo Calhoun. I'm a program manager at DARPA, and I believe that energy is fundamental to military dominance, as it is the currency by which we create and deliver military effect. So what I'm interested in is building more flexible and resilient energy webs by leveraging wireless power networks and thinking differently about energy as we move from monolithic to distributed systems.
Thanks so much. I think where we want to start off with to bring all the panelists back into this conversation, and because there's a number of you will just raise your hand if you've got a good answer to this. But going back to this idea of moonshots, I think there's still some folks who are interested in, some have commercial or actionable technology already today, but some are thinking about this moonshot and what their innovation, their powerhouse inside their own firms can do. What would you really say is the moonshot that you're interested in right now for your organization? Like what is the big pain point? We're looking for the first penguin to jump in the water and take those questions.
I'll take it. I'll break the ice there. I'll be the first penguin off the iceberg.
Thanks, Phoebe.
Yeah, so we thought a lot about this, right? And that's really why we came up with kind of the 4 of the 6 focus areas, which is, we want moonshots in generation of power, right? We have the traditional methods that have served us well, but there are new methods, there are new technologies, and there are some really interesting things in the generation of power that's happening out there. In the distribution or transmission of power, these wireless networks, power beaming, there is, again, there is really interesting stuff happening in the transmission. And then in the storage, we've got to move beyond lithium ion for numerous reasons, not the least of which is our access to lithium as a rare earth metal, the runaway thermal properties of lithium ion batteries. So in the storage area, I think we're definitely looking for moonshots. I saw one question on structural batteries already in the question and answer, and that was specifically put into the challenge. That is something that we are definitely looking for. This idea that you can make panels or structural components out of batteries or dual purpose them is really intriguing to us. And when you expand that and you think of all the places that can be applied to, you really do get into that moonshot region. So I'll turn it over to the crowd, but I really do think it's the generation of transmission and the storage and new equipment is really where we're looking for those moonshot ideas.
Any of our other panelists want to expand on that question of what your pain point is in a super concise response?
Yeah, let me take a try at because Mimi just gave the optimistic. This would be great. Let me emphasize the pain. Energy as it currently exists is expensive, it's heavy, it's big, and it's vulnerable. So all of those things make it a juicy target in one way or another for an adversary. And so that's the pain, I think, is that we need a lot of it, and it takes a lot of work to move it, to store it, to generate it. And so if we can do less of that, make it less of a vulnerability to our operation, that's why it's painful.
We had a question from John about, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add, so as we're talking about moonshot ideas, often it's really the combination of ideas that together within a network create outsized effects. So, if you're sitting on a technology that you're like, well, this isn't quite a moonshot idea, maybe it combined with something else then becomes something very interesting. So each one of those different levels within the network is important. So, there is the grand vision of where we can go, but there's a lot of steps along the way on that roadmap. So I want to encourage people to keep thinking that way as well.
Other panelists?
Yeah, this is Doug Ogino. I would just add on to that because this is actually an idea that BB threw out a while ago is that we could, execute one of these campaigns totally without fuel, which I think is a real moonshot idea. But it's still, it points to the same kind of thing. If you can reduce the demand side, and then of course the supply side becomes easier to deal with. So that's connecting the dots between the last comment and BB's wild idea. You can take the energy demands down, that helps, and as well as changing the energy type. If it's something that requires less effort, also helps, right? So start combining all those things and you can maybe come up with a moonshot.
Hey, Jack, I can offer something as well.
Please.
I'm a bit of the black sheep here, as I'm not necessarily an Air Force person, but speaking from the joint perspective, I'd like to echo BB's comments that distribution and storage is going to be a big challenge for us in this region of the world. I can mostly speak for the joint perspective that between the Air Force, Army, Marine Corps, and Navy, we're going to have to find a way to what we call do C2, command and control of all those assets. So in addition to the moonshot of just generating and storing energy, I would say that we're also interested in what ways do we do predictive analytics, whether it be via machine learning or artificial intelligence, such that we know where to put the energy in the right place at the right time.
Other panelists to build on those comments?
This is Lieutenant Colonel Kyle Grago. If I can jump in here.
Please.
Colonel Brisboy's deputy here, Air Force Warfighting Integration Capability. I've been blessed with having been able to spend 7 of my 20 years in the Air Force being stationed in islands in the Pacific. Most recently, Anderson Air Force Base, Guam. So when I think about some of the moonshots, I think about the operational context by which I just came from. So Anderson Air Force Base, Guam, Guam, U.S. territory. Out there, it's an outpost in an increasingly hostile area of the world. And so it will become operationally relevant pretty quickly if we go into any operation in the Pacific. It's also got a huge fuel dump right out there, so we can, fuel those forward forces. But they're also easily visible from Google Earth, so our adversaries can see that. So in an operational context, we may have to disperse to smaller islands, just like we did in World War II, back out to places like Palau and the favored states of Micronesia and the Northern Marianas Islands. How do we disperse our forces out to the smaller islands that don't have built-in infrastructure already, much typically poorer economies, and how do we then continue the fight by being able to generate, store, and transmit power in a high-end fight in that area? So that's where I'm very interested in some of the submissions that I've been reading, but how can we really change the way we think about energy for that future fight?
Great. Anyone else on that topic of pain points and what a moonshot might look like?
Yeah, this is Dan Pike from the Operational Energy Office. A couple of moonshots. So I'm tasked with looking at how we should do things from an energy perspective in the future, which can be far term. So a couple of things. We spend a lot of money on maintaining and sustaining, building, buying aircraft to deliver kinetic effects. And so if there are folks out there who can figure out how to deliver, whether it's kinetic or not, an effect that keeps us from having to do what the Air Force does a lot of, which is fly planes and maintain and sustain them, then that's going to be a huge help when it comes to crunching budget numbers. The second piece is to go the other direction, impose cost on the adversary. So the analogy I think of is in Back to the Future when Doc Brown throws garbage in the back of the DeLorean and he's off. If our fuel sources were so ubiquitous that, for example, China looks at us and says, well, I used to be able to take out their petroleum distribution networks and be good. I don't even know where to begin now. It would cost me so much money to go after all their fuel sources that I'm not even going to bother with that. Or they do decide to go that route, but it takes a lot of money to do it. I think those are the two moonshots that I think of.
Thanks for that. I think this is might be one for BB, or maybe you know who the best person to answer this question is. But this idea of you mentioned that you're looking at ideas. What do you need to see in terms of preliminary results when you are thinking about these moonshot ideas?
So I'm actually going to pass this one over to Steve Monday because I think he is the best one to answer this and talk a little bit more about our TMRO and kind of the timelines. You know, from when you submit in this challenge, you have the option of saying, you know, it's a now thing. It's kind of a 5 to 7 years, or it's you know 15 years now, right? It's the further out. And each one of those we kind of look for different things and. But Steve, over to you. I think you can answer that one really well. Okay, sounds like we lost Steve, so I'll answer it. Okay.
I'm
Steve, jump in if you come back up. Yeah, back to the TMRO, right? So we are looking for technology, right? What is the technology, and how can you demonstrate that there's actually a there, right? And you don't have to demonstrate the full capability. You have to show us at least that you've thought through the potential components and the technology levels of those components and how they fit together. And how and maybe you know just a rough sketch of how they all fit together, you know, at a very high level. So you know, we're not looking for the end solution, but you know, I'm trying to think of an example of one that we've looked at recently that would meet the bill that would answer it. But basically, we just want to know that you've thought through it. We don't need to see that the technology is actually there right now. A good example of one I think is this isn't related to energy, but we had a company approach us and say, hey, we think we can heal wounds. So if you know people in the Department of Defense get hurt in battle or whatever, we think we can heal wounds 60% faster than what's currently available today by using your body's DNA to heal itself, right? Now, obviously they can't prove that. It's theoretical in many ways. It's based off of research in DNA and the advances that they've made in technology and our ability to understand what's happening inside the body and things like that, right? But we bought into it because there was enough there that they proved that they knew what they were talking about, and they proved that they knew the building blocks of the technology. And so I think that is really what we're looking for is prove to us that you understand the building blocks of the technology and how they come together and what the ultimate end state is, right?
Yeah, that's great. I think we're coming up on the top of the hour. I'm wondering if, you know, based on those of you who have access to your computer screen, panelists, where you can see the open questions and the chat, are there any parting words of advice or gold nuggets for these solution providers that are listening in terms of, you know, what a really great submission would look like for you, or questions that you specifically want to address? I think some of these we can do, you know, over chat while we continue to progress through the day. But any parting words or gold nuggets to share?
Jackie, I'm sorry. We actually have an extra half an hour.
Oh, thanks, Shah. We have more time. That's great.
Hey, Jackie, Steve Monday here. So I guess in terms of advice, I would say, and this kind of harkens to what BB said, one is not getting too technical, but really painting a picture of the value, the operational value, or a vision of what their technology, their solution could provide. So it's almost kind of imagine if we could do this, if we had this capability, how would it transform the Air Force in a positive manner? What would the operational value and the organizational value be for this opportunity? And the other is being upfront, and maybe this is uncomfortable, but maybe being upfront and honest about the things that we don't know and some of the key challenges that need to be overcome. One, we have a better idea of what it would take, and it shows that that they really know what they're talking about and they've thought about it, and we can be a good partner with somebody like that, an organization like that, to kind of attack those critical challenges. Thank you.
This is Colonel Bartholomew. I'm sorry, I don't have access to the chat or to be able to see the questions. But one thing I would also just propose is that the technology itself is very important in terms of what the energy alternatives or opportunities may be, but would also ask to be thinking through the storage and distribution of that energy and what sort of concepts and requirements would be there for the storage and distribution of it to forces or capabilities or weapon systems, et cetera, especially, as I mentioned earlier, at austere types of locations where we're talking about being away from operating bases or airfields. Over.
Panelists looking to build on that comment? We have had some questions about specific to installation and which area to focus on is really most meaningful at this point. Is it for the warfighter? Is it for the air base? How do you see it in terms of the application of energy solutions from like the hyper-local level, all the way up to kind of these international plays across energy solutions?
So I'll answer that one again. I think we definitely are looking across wherever the good ideas are. So it's not just about the point-nose fighter jets. It's not just about the big cargo planes. As we discussed, as Kyle talked about, we're going to have to move out to areas where we're going to have to set up austere bases. And we're going to have to keep our large bases up and running after those large fuel depots and the power grids have been taken down, right? So there's a full spectrum that we're looking at, for solutions. And so, yeah, we're definitely interested across that full spectrum. And one of the other questions I just read while I was scrolling through goes back to one of Kava's points, and the person that authored the question said, it sounds like you guys are really interested in capabilities, weapon systems, things like that. What about the software that drives them and the analytics behind it, and all of the software that fits that? And yes, absolutely. It is a little bit harder, again, to understand how that fits without seeing it in a capability. So if I was a submitter, what I would do is I would look through all of the submissions on the website right now, and I would find places where I could partner, right? So if I've got a hardware solution, but I haven't thought through the software that goes with it, or the data analytics that go with it, or the control systems, or battery management, look through the rest of these submissions and reach out to them. Combined submissions that provide all of that are going to be much more powerful, right? And so if you're not thinking about that holistic picture, don't make us do the work. You guys go and look, through all the submissions. They're all available, and talk to other people and figure out how you can bring the hardware and the software together in one.
And is there a way to go about this question of who is the main end user for energy data today in an installation?
Bart, can you answer that one?
Yeah, this is Colonel Bartholomew. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Yep.
Okay. So I made a comment before you did before, and I clearly didn't come across. So on the installations piece, there's a couple of things. One thing that's really important is the energy alternative or opportunity that we're looking at innovatively. But the other thing that's really important, as I mentioned earlier, is the storage and distribution of that energy. And specifically, while we talk about the traditional bases and airfields, we also are looking at operating from austere locations away from those airfields and traditional, quote, infrastructure that you would have. That also leads into the question about, support and other places. So host nation support is another thing to think about as you look at opportunities and challenges in operating from austere locations, is where we might have opportunities with the provision of these new energy technologies with any host nation support or agreements or arrangements, right? So those are two things to think about. In terms of the installation piece, like I said, I think one of the things that is very new for us as an Air Force and even as a department, especially for the Air Force, is looking at that austere piece away from where we would normally have the ability to store and distribute energy, whether it's petroleum-based or electric or otherwise. I hope that helps to answer that question. Over.
Yeah, Bart, I think the real question, though, and this may go to IMSC, but when we have analytic tools that are measuring, the outputs of energy on a base, who's looking at that? Who's bringing it all together, and who's making decisions based off of that data? And the answer may be right now we're not doing a whole lot with it, but I know there are some nascent efforts that started with IMSC. I don't know if you could talk to that more.
Yeah, so Installation and Mission Support Center is one, and then also within A4 and Installations and Engineering IE, right? That's another place in SAF IE that looks at, those energy requirements, et cetera. I unfortunately don't have my government laptop to grab something more specific than that, but Installation and Mission Support Center located in San Antonio, Texas. It's one of the centers of the Air Force Materiel Command, AFMC, as well as SAF IE and energy, requirements from that base location piece. I don't know if that's helpful. Over.
Yeah, very helpful. Kava, do you have anything to add from INDOPACOM on how we're evaluating the data that we have and where that's being stored and evaluated?
Yeah, yes, sir. I think at least from a joint perspective, I do want to echo a point that having the right data allows us to make better informed decisions. So, from at least a Navy side, I'm not an Air Force person, but at least from the Navy side, our Navy installations are the platforms from which we're going to fight in this AOR. And so, obviously that comes down to people like Naval Facilities Pacific, as well as the units that reside at those facilities. So when it comes down to who uses the energy data, I don't want to be too much tongue in cheek, but honestly, it's everyone. All the way from the E2, E3, from your enlisted, all the way up to the senior leader levels, getting more data and having systems, like Internet of Things, you could say, of sensors and monitors to know how much we're using, how we're using it, what are we wasting, allows us to be smarter about how we use that energy and ultimately be required to deliver less. So again, I'm not necessarily sure if that's answering that particular question, but honestly, everyone up and down the chain will benefit from getting accurate, relevant, and timely energy data. Over.
Yeah, and something Kava just said there that I want to pull a little thread on is using this Internet of Things type data where everybody has access to it. Absolutely, and that is the answer. It's going to have to be from the lowest level or enlisted all the way up through the senior leaders. But in our submissions, we also have to talk about how we protect that data, and we don't allow others that we don't want to see the data. So it's we definitely have to get the data out there, and everybody has to see it. But we got to figure out a network in which it connects and is protected. And so we're looking for those ideas as well, right?
I want to get to a couple more of our attendee questions, and just remind attendees that if you're asking questions that are pertinent to your submission itself or to the evaluation process, the opportunities to refine and resubmit your proposal, we will be answering all of those in the later portion of this webinar. So we'll switch back to Heather with AFWERX challenges to make sure that we get all those questions answered. So just know that we're putting a pin in those, and we'll make sure to cover those. Any thoughts from the questions about access for the Air Force to technology that's coming from special access programs? And Kevin, who's asking that question, we might need just a little more clarity on what a special access program is if you want to repost that.
So I can talk to that, not from the AFWERX perspective, but from the DARPA perspective. We are tracking all the stuff going on in the SAP world and trying to fold it into our solutions. And then as things become interesting, we're trying to communicate across the board with our partners in AFWERX as well.
Thanks, Paul. Another question, are security solutions for alternative energy systems applicable for this challenge?
Can they clarify that one? Can somebody, is there a way to clarify that a little?
Clarifying on what in reference to alternative energy?
Well, the security, can you read the question one more time, Jackie?
They're simply just asking for if alternative energy is relevant to this challenge.
Absolutely. You know, yeah. If by, I mean that's I think that is the heart of the challenge in many ways is what alternatives do we have, right? And if it's in the generation, then we are absolutely interested in hearing novel ways that haven't been approached yet.
And what about the buildings? This person is asking, what about the 300,000 buildings that the DoD manages? Any interest in those energy solutions?
This is Dan Pike, Operational Energy. Definitely interest in that, and I think in a lot of ways, if you can't power your base, you're gonna lose a lot of capability from the aircraft itself. So that's key. However, I would caveat that with two things: total energy use in the Air Force in terms of dollars spent, $6 billion total spent in energy each year, billion with a B. 5 billion of that is jet fuel. So I would expect, if I were an investor in the Air Force, that there would be a commensurate percentage investment in operational energy versus installation energy. The second piece is, if you maybe think a little bit forward in 15 years from now, perhaps, or more, you Google Russia Skyfall and you'll find out about Russia's fission-powered cruise missile that they're working on. That missile doesn't need an aircraft to carry it, and therefore it doesn't need a base to support it, and it doesn't need base power. So are we going to get there in 5 years? No. Are we ever going to completely eliminate bases? No. But I think there's two ways to look at that problem.
And would you say you have particular priorities in different types of energy? The examples this attendee gave were electricity generation, storage versus liquid fuels, especially jet fuel.
Yeah, maybe Colonel Bartholomew, you answer that one.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. And so the question, I couldn't hear the question clearly. Can you restate it for me? I'm sorry.
The question is asking if you have a priority for the different types of energy. Hold on one moment. As the questions come in, they jump around on my screen. Let me go back. For example, electricity generation, storage versus liquid fuels, jet fuel, if they're a priority for different types of energy.
So from my perspective, looking at it from a logistics under attack and an agile combat support standpoint, we don't have a specific priority for the types of energy, but the ones that you mentioned are important types of energy that we would be looking for. From where we sit, it's related to those capabilities that we are pursuing that are either new, that require new types of energy. And again, I'm sorry, I bring up electric because of the Agility Prime and the flying cars, orbs, if you will, and the electric sort of concept there. But additionally, we're not just looking at new energy pieces for new capabilities coming online, but if there's some way that we have energy opportunities to address some of the existing weapon systems, which probably might be a more difficult nut to crack when you're talking about petroleum-based, jet fuel types of things. But that doesn't mean that obviously there aren't opportunities that exist that can be more efficient and effective in delivering combat power. So from a priority standpoint, we're from Agile Combat Support, again, and from Logistics Under Attack, our piece is related to the capabilities that cut across the entire Air Force. So we don't have a priority from our perspective per se. I don't know if that's helpful or not. We're looking for creative and good opportunistic thinking for what alternatives may be out there in terms of technology. Over.
That's great. I also had a clarifying question for you, and I'm scrolling up again. You had mentioned the San Antonio Emissions Reporting Unit. Could you just again restate those acronyms for the group and where they can find how to find more information about that?
Sure. So the first one is the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, IMSC, Air Force IMSC, and that is one of the centers that belongs to the Major Command, or the MAJCOM, Air Force Materiel Command, AFMC. A good point of contact you can actually get through my team for more information is Major Ryan Price. Major Price is currently my Installation and Mission Support Core Capability Team Chief for Agile Combat Support. And Ryan in the Afworks, Major Price, has all of the appropriate relationships at the center itself who can help to guide you to the right folks there. The other one that I mentioned was SAF-IE, Installations and Engineering. I don't have a specific contact for that, but we can, while we're continuing here with this, I'll see if I can locate a specific, POC for you. Over.
That's great, thank you. We will do our best to provide a list of the resources mentioned during today's webinar as well. So if we can add that in later and make sure that our attendees receive that by email. Thank you for that. I want to make sure panelists feel free to jump in. I know that many of you can see some of the questions coming across. Colonel BB, are there questions here that you think would be a great fit for what the team should be covering today? I see Heather is jumping in to identify where she can ask questions about the process again. That will be coming up after this panel concludes. But what about on the tech and solution side? What else are you seeing that would be great to cover today?
I'm scrolling through. Let's see.
I do see a specific question for Kava, and that is this interest in remote communications. So a lot of folks are asking where to find this group that's talking today, and that's part of why AFWERX created this challenge series. It is a more organized and structured way for folks to be able to find the contacts and the customers and end users within the Air Force of how we really connect those. But is there a good way to learn more about your interests, and will you be participating in that people have an opportunity to connect with you?
Yeah, Jackie, I can take that. And again, I apologize for the wind noise. Hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you okay, and again, we're all living vicariously.
Sure, sure thing. I'll try to speak up and speak slowly. Again, it's a pretty windy day here in Honolulu. But I do want to address the question of communications. When it comes to a logistics standpoint, communications is really the lifeblood of sustainment. And I think throughout the panel today, you've heard a lot from the folks here talking about working from austere environments, places that don't necessarily have a normal footprint. And that's true for all the services. And in order to enable that, though, we do need, secure lines of communication, whether they be physical, digital, or anything else. And ultimately, the reason why that's important to operational energy or energy in general is in order for us to provide, again, the right energy at the right specification at the right time, we need to communicate. So in my mind, at least, they're inextricably linked. Being able to know as a logistician when to push something forward and when not to, in order to allocate resources appropriately, is the name of the game. When your area of responsibility is 52% of the world's surface, we don't have enough planes and ships to get everywhere. And again, we never want to constrain operations. So, I think to get at that question very simply, being able to communicate in whatever form or fashion is important. And I think, at least from a joint perspective up here, we're always very interested in all the forms of communication, whether it be communication over laser, ad hoc networks, balloons, undersea cables. We're looking for those out-of-the-box thinking, such that we can support the warfighter at the tactical edge. And then again, so on the communication theme, you can get to me via email. I would assume that, Jackie, through this forum, that we will have our emails available. Again, I am open to any discussion. And one other comment I'd make is, at least for the submitters, don't feel that an idea is too off the wall or too out of the box. As a community, we need to think outside of the box, because thinking inside the box is how we got ourselves into this box. So I encourage the group to just be wild with it. The worst that I think the community can say is definitely no. But if you spark an idea, a spark can create a flame, and we really want that. So again, a long way to go about saying, yeah, love all the ideas, happy to chat.
That's great. Thanks for that. And Vivi, I'll turn it back over to you. I'm seeing that we have questions about security in terms of cybersecurity, securing infrastructure and data. Is that part of your energy challenge?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And we talked about this a little while ago when I pulled that thread on what Kava said. But yeah, a strong submission will cover those points, right? Because like we said, we want access to all that data, and we want that data to flow to all the appropriate people, but we've got to ensure that there's security built in that as well. And so there are networks that we're building. We're not asking you to build the joint command and control network, but we are looking for, have you thought through how your Internet of Things solution, or whatever's capturing your data, and how it connects to a larger information grid. But security is definitely a part of it. That's the short answer. The larger answer is we don't want you to try and recreate that. There's a whole other focus area called the Joint All-Domain Command and Control JADC2 that has got the stick to try and create the connections of everything to everything else on the battlefield. And so they're working diligently on that. And you can find that in the Air Force through ABMS, Air Battle Management System, and their on-ramps that they run they run smaller challenges that build on each other. About every 4 months they have an on-ramp, and you can, if that's an area of interest, definitely look into those. One of the questions I saw in here that I'd like DARPA to come online and talk about is the microgrids. And whether we're interested in those plug and play microgrids specifically, and then what are the pain points with those microgrids. So if anybody, if our DARPA rep can come on and talk to that, Calhoun, I'd be really interested in hearing your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I'll say that across DARPA, there is a lot of work going on in trying to ensure robust and secure conventional energy networks via microgrids. A lot of interest in cybersecurity and monitoring and things like that, as adversaries try to do nefarious things to our existing energy infrastructure. So there is some work going on at DARPA in that space. My personal interest is in leveraging new emerging technologies to move past sort of the physical infrastructure and thinking more flexibly about untethered energy through wireless power transfer across the space. So that's where I'm focused, but there are other efforts, particularly in the cyber domain, looking specifically at how we can do energy intelligently at the installation level through existing infrastructure.
Kyle, have you seen any other questions in there that are interesting from our perspective?
I'm sorry, Colonel Beebe, was that directed to me?
No, I'm sorry, that was Kyle Drago.
Oh, Roger, sir.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you said Kyle or Kyle either. So one interesting question I thought there was what would a nuclear fission moonshot look like to you? Anyone on the panel want to take that one?
So I'm happy to take maybe a little bit of that, not the whole thing. You know, nuclear power is definitely very interesting. I would say, you know, there are elements within the Department of Defense that are taking a look at those things, to include the Army. You know, that obviously has, I think small modular reactors have a definite benefit when it comes to being able to provide very large amounts of power at very austere locations. So I would definitely say that's definitely interesting. You know, there are obviously second and third order effects of you know, access and permissions to use those things in certain locations. But from a technological perspective, you know, I think any opportunity to create very large amounts of uninterruptible power is extremely attractive. Over.
This is Colonel Bartholomew again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just kind of related to this question, and also to the question about SAF, i.e., in terms of energy for the Air Force. Their actual title is Energy Installations and Environment, but it's called SAF, i.e. The energy program has three parts to it. There's offices. There's installation energy, Office of Energy Assurance, and then operational energy. And so I think possibly on the nuclear question, you might be able to get a little bit more in terms of the nuclear piece, maybe from the operational energy guys or the energy assurance folks. But basically what SAF-IE does is they're the ones that, for the Air Force, who are responsible for the strategic management and oversight of our energy efforts for the Air Force, our partnerships, the program and policy development across the whole Air Force enterprise. And it basically, those are the folks that have those three supporting sub-program areas. So what they do is they work on improving resilience, optimizing demand, assuring supply is vital since each mission and capability depends on energy. So those folks look at resiliency, reliability, and readiness of the Air Force from an energy perspective. So in terms of the nuclear question, you may be able to get something more focused from the folks there. I do have contact information, at least a telephone number for you, or you can go straight to SAF-IE's website, safie.hq.af.mil/energy, just as a start. Over.
Great. Again, we'll be looking to compile these resources and make sure that those go out to the attendees. And I do want to point out as well that you can, if you're an attendee, see some of the questions that have been answered. There's been over 50 questions answered just in the text and in the chat. So make sure that you're scrolling through there too to see where we might be crossing over in your questions. For the AFWERX team and for all of our panelists, we're right at the bottom of the hour. I'm wondering if you have any last burning thoughts or resources or information that our attendees really need to know from you while we have you today. I'll hold a moment of silence for anyone who wants to jump in.
Well, this is Doug Ogino. I don't know if it qualifies as a burning thought, but it is a thought that came to me when Bibi was speaking earlier. And that's, I think you mentioned Internet of Things. And so as we go forward, I think we should all be thinking about Internet of Things in the sense that all of these systems become systems of systems, that all systems should start thinking about providing data that will be useful at the next level up. So if your system pumps fuel, it would be good that the system is self-reporting, you know, flow rates and pressures so that those things can be monitored and fed in to a, you know, a data warehouse so that anomalies that could perhaps foretell a maintenance problem could be spotted. So all those kinds of data sources should be thought of in any new kind of technology system. Over.
Not a burning thought, then a renewable thought. Thanks for that.
Hey, Jackie, I do have two things. If nobody else has got anything, one, there was a question I just want to re-examine. Is the question was my company? How do I show that we have experience doing moonshots in the past? And you can't, right? The moonshots by definition only come around every once in a while, and the really good ones, right? And so we won't evaluate you on past performance of completing moonshots, right? What we will evaluate you on is the idea going to move the needle, and have you articulated enough in that we can understand that there is actually something there worth pursuing. Somebody else said, I see that the best written proposals always tend to be the ones that get selected. I would say yes and no, right? If you can articulate, we're not looking for writing style, right? I'm not looking for the next James Michener, somebody that's, going to make it really interesting. But what I do need you to do is have the ability to articulate what your idea is, right? I've only got so long. If I've got 1,000 submissions that we're going through, and we want 5 evaluators on each of those, right? You can start to stack up the time. And so the evaluations do have to hit home, and they do have to be written concisely and in a manner that allows us to understand what you're trying to articulate. And the reality is if you can do that and you have a good idea, you bring those two parts together and you've got a really good shot at getting selected here. So that's kind of my get off the stage there. And as a final thought, I just wanted to say thank you again to everybody that pulled this together, everybody that made this possible, and to all the companies again that took the time to do an early submission. Allow us to look over those. I hope this has been helpful for you. As Kava said, I'm happy to talk at any time. They can post my email in the chat up there. Look me up on LinkedIn, in various places. But again, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this and for allowing us to move the ball down the field and do good work for the warfighters that are out on the forward edge out there. So thank you.
Thanks to that. This is the moment where it's okay to stand and stretch. We're going to switch over into talking about the AFWERX challenge process, answer these questions about evaluation and revising proposals, as well as some information about funding opportunities from the AFVentures team. But I want to take a moment to just really thank all of the panelists today for taking time to impart valuable insights about complex ideas, about some of these systems that are really hard to understand when you're coming from the outside and from the external community. So this is really what makes collaboration possible at scale and is very much a core value of what we're trying to do at AFWERX. So thanks to all of our panelists for taking time, and to attendees for putting out your questions, big and small, and we hope we can continue to provide information based on the information that you're asking, and that we can help to answer those questions throughout the remaining weeks in the deadline lead up to the AFWERX challenge process. So please do stretch. Thanks again to our panelists. They'll be closing out. We hope some of them can stick around to maybe help to answer some of those questions in the Q&A that we didn't get to. So panelists, if you do have thoughts that you want to share, go ahead and do that in the Q&A. But right now we are going to shift gears into this AFWERX challenge, and as well as sharing opportunities for eligible companies to access non-dilutive funding to explore how AFWERX and the DoD can become a market for solutions that have commercial viability. And so this segment will focus heavily on CBER and STTR, and we'll explain what those are if you're not familiar with them. As well as the AFWERX and AFVentures open topic process. So to speak to the AFWERX challenge process and your submission and evaluation questions, we'll bring back AFWERX Strategic Innovation Officer, Heather Wild-Renzi. Hi, Heather. And then also, I believe we're confirming, oh, I see Captain Laver and Zoe Walter. So First Lieutenant Zoe Walters with AFVentures. AFVentures is the investment arm of AFWERX in the Air Force. And Captain Steve Laver, who's Deputy Director, of AFVentures. And so these are two accomplished folks who are doing the work day in and day out to connect high potential solutions from qualifying companies to funding and also to customer discovery opportunities. I think they can also do some work to shed light on some of the additional resources that were mentioned, like how companies are getting access to strategic capabilities like labs and to some of the commercial transition and technology transfer opportunities that are out there. So these are major players in the team that are helping companies access these opportunities to get on contract and to successfully navigate the process and the opportunities that are out there. So I think what we'll do first is, since folks already have a sense from Heather of AFWERX challenges and the information that we can do there, Steve, can I turn it over to you to tell us more about AFVentures and the investment objectives and what's up with this open topic conversation?
100%. Thank you all so much for having me today. It's such a pleasure. And then my colleague Zoe Walters is also on too, who will be speaking towards a lot of the phase one portion of this. And I'm going to cover any random question because I've been with the program for a little while now. And then specifically the direct to phase twos, which I'll talk about. But zooming out a little bit, Air Force Ventures is the Air Force's strategic investment arm. And so one of the things that we've noticed throughout our several years now in AFWERX is that the amount of private funding going into doing research and development into technologies that we care about as well in the Air Force is massive. And we've seen this divergence of private funding going into those technologies as compared to public funding coming from government sources. And so I would say that Air Force Ventures coming into existence is an acknowledgement that if we want to keep our edge with our adversaries, if we want to maintain our edge when it comes to just being on the front of emerging technologies, we need to find a way to work with and work for those companies and investors that are out there doing that development. And what that means is structuring our own programs in such a way that we help you, right? We become an asset to you and your growth as a company. And that when you're doing your risk calculus of do I work with the government or not, we've made it so easy, so low friction, and so high potential that you say this is a no-brainer, I do want to work with the Air Force. So the processes that we've created for Air Force Ventures are meant to do just that. The majority of our portfolio so far has been funded by the SBIR STTR program. And so these are small business set-asides every year that have to be spent on small businesses that are doing innovative research and development. And so based on our understanding and our empathy for startup founders, we tweaked some of the rules of this program in such a way that we could hopefully bring in new talent with new great concepts and help to get them along the path of ultimately having a positive impact on our warfighter. When I say warfighter, it's actually a very broad term. Anyone who's doing an operational mission with us, whatever that may be, we want to have a positive impact on them. And so just in 2 years of existence, we've seen over 1,000 new companies who have never worked with SBIR before, this program I mentioned, coming in to work with us, which is fantastic. You know, there's been this general consolidation of those who are working with the DoD over the last several decades, where the number of companies has gone from the dozens to under 10 to an even smaller number when it comes to our very big projects. One of our big goals with Air Force Ventures is not just bringing a lot of great companies into the top of the funnel, but is to make the process reliable such that many of them are making it to the finish line, and we are inducing competition into this market of what does it mean to work with the Air Force. So we want to see that industrial base grow yet again. And again, our process is meant to do just that. I'm going to describe the Air Force Ventures SBIR process, and then I'll kind of open it up or pass it over to Zoe for anything that I've missed, which I'm sure there will be some things. It is a 3-phase process, and it begins with phase 1, which is the top of the funnel. It is an open topic by nature, and what that means is that any solution that has some kind of commercial applicability and also has a potential Air Force use case can apply through this top of the funnel. Right? So you don't need to fit a very specific set of requirements to come in through the phase 1 of this open SBIR topic with Air Force Ventures. We do call out for this 3 times per year. We make a large number of small awards, or what we consider to be small bets in the beginning. Right? So it's roughly 1,000 of these awards per year. So that's 300 to 400 per each of these 3 cycles. A side note, we are currently in our 3rd cycle right now. So 20.3, meaning the 3rd cycle of 2020, is open and closes on October 22nd at 12 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to foot stomp this at the end, but the 3rd of those cycles is open now. Now, once a company is in phase 1, they receive up to $50,000 in 90 days to validate that there is an actual need for their solution inside the Air Force somewhere. We are a 685,000 person organization, and we understand that it's difficult to know if we need your solution or not. So once you're in phase 1, it's all about finding that there is actually a need for your solution. There is a customer out there somewhere who says, we need this, and developing a plan with them and a feasibility study to say, what would it look like if we tried to prototype and scale this within the Air Force? Now, if you can find that customer and validate that need, phase 2 is the next step. It's up to $750,000 of this SBIR funding. We encourage matching funding from both government and private sources as a sign of skin in the game and as a way to increase your likelihood of success and eventual transition. And during that time, you are prototyping the solution or making the adaptations or developments on your existing solution to be useful to that customer you identified in phase 1. Okay, and then the thing that I think is most exciting about this, I should mention 300 to 500 phase 2 awards per year. So the funnel gets a little bit smaller at that phase 2, but there's another step 2, and we call it the strategic fund increase, or you'll hear it called StratFi for short, or the big bets, if you will. Roughly 20 of these per year. And we do it once per year as opposed to 3. And this is for those companies that are in phase 2 that are showing not only that they think they have a validated need, that they're actually executing to solve it. So their customers inside the Air Force are happy with them, they're making progress, but they need a significant infusion of capital to get them across the finish line and to scale their solution in such a way that it can be operationally useful to us. And that's where StratFi comes into play. This last round, we did the very first one of these last year. Minimum award size from SBIR of 3 million, and the maximum was 15 million, and we required matching. So we wanted to see at least for every $1 we had of this, our money, there was $1 coming from some other government source. Again, skin in the game, and at least $2 coming from some private source. And that doesn't have to be for equity. There's a number of things that count as private matching funding. But when we make these really big investments, we want to know that there are signals from the commercial side of the house that say, yes, I think this will succeed, and yes, I want to put my money there. And from the government side where they say, you know what, this is something that is a strategic capability for me and my mission. So that's kind of the end of this process, except to say that after this StratFi, or even just after you've entered the top of the funnel, you're eligible once you're in the SBIR pipeline for expedited acquisitions. And what that means is because you competed to win that initial award, whenever you go somewhere else in the Air Force or the broader federal government to sell that particular solution, they don't need to recompete again. And it makes it simpler for them to buy, which makes it more likely for you to sell. So anyway, that is the end-to-end process. I probably talked too much and missed a lot. I want to pass it to Zoe if there's any high points, especially with the focus areas that I did not touch on.
Oh yeah, that's a good point, Steve. No, I think you caught everything SIBR-wise, and it was a great outline of the process. The only thing I'll add, and this isn't new, but it's kind of taking on a new flavor, is the focus areas. So as you guys know, Steve talked about the open topic and it truly being very open. So anybody with any technology can apply to that topic and then go out and search and see, hey, is somebody in the Air Force looking for or needing the technology that I have? One way we can kind of jumpstart that is with what we call focus areas. And it's a list of areas, technology areas of interest, basically, that folks within the Air Force, pretty much far and wide in the Air Force, have inputted to us, and we keep those on the AFWERX website. So if you go to the AFWERX website, look at the Air Force Ventures tab, and then scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a section for focus areas. We keep those up to date, and so the list that you see now may not be the list that you see in 2 weeks or in 6 weeks. So if you keep looking through that, it should be easy to search through. You can kind of get that initial starting point, right? So you have a technology and you're looking for that customer. This is a great starting point. A lot of them have POC information, so you can reach out to that POC. You can have someone to connect to within the Air Force because it is a large organization and it's hard to find the right person. that's a really good indication that that's the right person to start with, because they directly have that problem and have stated that. And so we aid those, or we use those to aid you guys, as well as our POCs within the Air Force, to actually be connected to you all. You know, even if you don't identify that beforehand, you know, if you make it into our pipeline, we'll then do our best to connect you to the right people within the Air Force, at least on that list, to give you that first connection. And it might not be the, you know, the best starting point, but at least through some sort of interaction, you can recognize that. And then usually they'll be able to point you in the right direction for who you should actually go talk to. So that's a big part of our program, and kind of the, I would say, the grass. So it's the very bottom part, and it underlies everything that we do. Those, you know, as Steve mentioned, SBIR is our main investment right now, but in the future, those will be used for any type of program that Air Force Ventures is running. So that's not just related to SBIR. And you can use those focus areas, those POCs for any of the Air Force Ventures programs.
So really opening up the market. And I think there's a couple of things to really highlight. It's that the process, the opportunity to submit proposals is open 3 times a year. So while there's one happening right now in the way that it lines up with the Energy Challenge, there'll be another that comes open in Q1 of next year. So that's good for people to know that it's not just, you know, this one and done, and the timing doesn't have to align perfectly. There'll be future opportunities. And then this idea of the open topic. So you can see the focus areas to see what's specifically being called for, but the open topic essentially allows companies to submit proposals for solutions to needs that may not even have been defined or identified yet. So those are really good points to note. And Heather, I want to bring you back into the conversation, because I think what's interesting here is finding what this alignment between the Energy Challenge and what's happening there with proposal submissions, and then AFWERX and the possible funding opportunities. How do those align?
So the interesting thing about these challenges right now is that we have all of these energy challenges that are going on under the umbrella of the Reimagining Energy for the DoD. And some of these happen to match up with the SBIR call. So what we've done is we're trying to identify the teams that are submitting for the energy topic. We're not looking at their solutions. We're not looking at what they're actually submitting, but we know that if you are a US entity and you're under a certain amount, then you generally qualify for this call that the SBIR team has. So then we can help you, like, because we have this topic that closely aligns with what the SBIR is, we're assuming that you can make it work in some way. So that's basically why this is an interesting opportunity. So we're trying to work together to help funnel people that would be eligible and already have done part of the work to get them over the finish line.
And kind of to that point, if I could jump in for a second, is we actually have the Energy Challenge and the Space Challenge as like a focus area. So you'll see it in that list. And a good way to utilize that is if you're part of the Energy Challenge, or you're going through that process through AFWERX, you are starting to find, right, that kind of end user, that POC. And so that's a great thing to note in your proposal. Say, hey, I took part in the Energy Challenge. These were the people that I talked to, and this is why I know that they need my technology. So that's that, I would say, that direct link.
And how do the submission requirements compare? Do we have a high level overview of how a SBIR submission is different from a challenge submission?
So the challenge submission, think of it as like the abstract. We say, like, you should be able to do your challenge submission in an hour, and like that generally translates to like 10 hours of work. So I mean, you have to put all the information together, but I mean, it's quick. But then the SBIR submission, you should be able to do your SBIR submission in 10 hours. So translate that to how long it actually takes. But I mean, so ours is the abstract. And if you have something that's interesting, then you go deeper for the SBIR.
And so it's not the same process. Everyone that would be interested, that's working on the energy challenge, would need to submit a separate proposal under the SBIR STTR process.
Yeah. There's a lot more information. It's a lot more in-depth.
I would be interested to hear from you, Zoe or Steve. What are the eligibility criteria for companies, and what just high level, what is the submission requirement for the SBIR program for Open Topic?
So I'll jump, and then Steve, you take maybe the direct phase 2 requirements, because they're a little bit more stringent. So generally we say, there are small business standards that you can go find, but kind of the big ones are under 500 employees and more than 50% in the United States, right? Steve, is there any other big ones?
Greater than 50% US owned and controlled, which is kind of a nuance. And then the 500 employees, that includes any affiliates, which is another nuance there. But yeah.
Yep. And then the submission requirements for phase 1, just like Heather said, it's a 5-page white paper basically, and then 15 slides in a slide deck. And that's about it. There's a few, certifications that you have to have that you'll see in the solicitation that you'll complete online through DSIP and that kind of thing. But really, it's just the 5-page white paper and then 15 slides.
Yeah, spot on. And so the one thing I'll add for direct to phase 2, which I alluded that can exist. The idea is that if you already know who your customer is and you've already plotted a trial with them, then you can skip the phase 1 and go direct to phase 2, as the name implies. Now, the way that we capture that interest of your Air Force customer is this template document we created called the Customer Memorandum. And it covers everything from, I am this Air Force customer, this is my mission, I am interested in this company to solve X problem for me. And it goes into, if we fund the phase 2 effort, here's exactly what we're going to do together, breaking it out to the milestone level, and even discussing the transition strategy, i.e. if this is successful, what are we going to do to buy it and use it operationally? So those are all items that tend to be pretty in the weeds, but that it's intentional. We want to know that we're investing funding in a solution that's likely to succeed. And all of that work of drafting and signing that customer memorandum is done between you and your technical POC, i.e. your Air Force customer, whoever's going to benefit from your solution or buy it at the end of the day. And you include that as part of your proposal. The other difference with phase 2 is that it is 15 pages versus 5 pages for the white paper, and it's 15 slides, the same as for phase 1.
Steve,
go ahead,
Joey,
Joey.
I'd like to jump in and add to your question there. I work with Steve and Zoe, and I'm answering questions in chat. So one of the things that also came up is who can sign those MOUs and at what level do they need to be? And it can be airmen at any level around the Air Force. So thanks for letting me jump in, Steve. I just saw that in chat and wanted to add into it.
Yeah, really, really good point. And what I would emphasize there is, though we don't put a restriction for the phase 2s at least on what is the rank or position of the individual, we do ask and we do assess, is it the right person? i.e. do they have the authority to make those decisions, both for the execution of that phase 2, and if they're saying, here's our transition strategy, are they in a position that they can influence that strategy, right? So anyone can sign on, but we put it on you to be able to articulate, am I the right person or not, and why?
So I want to go to an attendee question about funding opportunities. So right now we're talking about through AFWERX, the primary funding mechanism is the SBIR and the Open Topic process. But Heather, are there funding opportunities associated with the challenge, or how does all of that work for companies that are interested in submitting proposals?
So each challenge is different. So some of them are prize challenges where there is a prize purse associated with the challenge. And other ones are contract challenges where there's no specific number of contracts that will be awarded, but there are contracting funds. Like there's a bucket of funds that are associated that can be pulled from. and others are potential prototyping challenges where there is a sponsor and they are putting out a call and there are funds that they can tap and they're hoping that they can find the solution in this crowdsource that they're looking for. But if they don't find the thing that is the need, then nothing may be awarded. So there's the three types that get run. So there's always money, and it just depends.
And the important thing to clarify from an attendee's remark, what we're saying is you can participate in the energy challenge on its own, the SBIR opportunity on its own. You do not need to submit proposals for both to be eligible for the energy challenge program.
Correct. You can attend, you can participate in the energy challenge. I like to tell people to see the energy challenge as a marketing opportunity, as a way for people inside the government to know that you exist, because it's one of the hardest things as any business, like no matter what size you are, is to find those stakeholders in the government that are interested in who you are. And whether you are whether you get selected as part of the challenge process or not, all throughout this, you will have eyes on your solution from people all throughout the many branches of the DoD. I mean, like our evaluators, our people that participate in the showcases, like we will be marketing your solution to people on your behalf. So the challenge process, think of it as a marketing opportunity for every hour you put into it, that you are getting marketing money out of this. So whereas with the SBIR process, it is like if you get selected, you definitely will get money, but it's a very small amount of people that will ever see your solution through the SBIR process.
And so for the folks who are asking about how to connect with potential end users in the Air Force, challenges are one way to go about that.
Yeah. And then another thing, like they're always asking for, people are always asking for us to give them connections and exhibitor lists. And I saw somebody was asking us to give the lists of emails for the government stakeholders. That's something that we actually cannot do. Like you can ask people directly for their contact information, but we can't give you lists of government contractors and government employees, but you can ask for them directly. So one of the best ways to market to people in the government is to go through us or someone like us, because we can reach out on your behalf because you can't get their information because of privacy concerns.
Right, another event the AFWERX hosts for this would be the Collider events, where they're bringing companies together one-on-one to talk with potential end users about problem statements that they advertise. I'm going through the list of questions here, so it's a little bit out of order, but we do have some questions about STTR, which is the complement to SBIR. For the AFWERX team, could you share a little bit more about the STTR program and how it compares to SBIR?
Absolutely. And I'll pause for a second. Jared, are you on the line? I don't know if you're scheduled to, but the expert on STTR is Jared, at least within our program. No, so that's okay. A portion of this overall SBIR/STTR budget is for STTR. It's a smaller portion. I don't know the number exactly off the top of my head, but the intent here is
70 million.
How much?
70?
That sounds about right. So on the order of that. And the idea behind this is the companies, as part of their eligibility requirement, must have some type of proposed work that includes either a laboratory or a university, and actually hospitals can fall under that purview as well, that it's some type of shared work that's occurring. Now, this program is phenomenal. We've started bringing that same, phase 1, phase 2, Strat-Fi, phase 3 process that we do with Air Force Ventures to STTR as well. And Jared and his team and a number of incredible folks over at the SBIR Center of Excellence have led the most successful proposal round ever with STTR. on several orders of magnitude greater numbers of proposal than have applied to this program before. So the interest is growing. I think it's a phenomenal opportunity because a lot of the best innovations are often born within universities or with some affiliation to a lab. So this is a great opportunity. Beyond that, the programs are fairly similar. We structure the timing and the amounts separately between the two. So it's not always going to be 50,000, 750K like I described for SBIR. They can modulate the amount with STTR based on their program requirements. So those are the big differences. And then for anyone else on the panel, any other things you'd like to highlight there?
I'd say the other kind of big difference in the way we typically, push people to either SBIR or SITR is based on your what we would call a technology readiness level. So earlier stage technologies, if you're doing more basic research, you have a prototype type of, if that's about where you're at, then you're probably more geared towards STTR. Where if you are farther along with your product or have a commercial product available, then you're probably more geared towards SBIR. So that's a kind of good differentiator as well.
Great. So another topic that's coming up is really around IP. What happens to IP? How does the Air Force look at the IP that's coming across in proposals that are submitted? And let me get the wording here. We have a lot of questions coming in, so I'm scrolling here. Pardon me. What happens to the IP for products that are procured as a part of SBIR or the challenge process? Are there limitations to commerce and to the general public?
So just in general, if a company owns the patents on something, they continue to own that. The Air Force doesn't take over somebody's patents unless that becomes part of your contract negotiations. So so just by submitting to these processes, you are not giving up your IP.
100%. And from a SBIR perspective, I'm not as good with the legalese, but I'm going to read you an excerpt which is relevant. It is actually in the solicitation, so I do encourage you to take a look, section 11.5, where it talks about technical data rights. Now, SBIR carries with it some unique rights when it comes to your technical data. And so here it is. The government obtains a royalty-free license to use such technical data only for government purposes during the period commencing with the contract or other transaction award and ending after 20 years. This data should be marked blah, 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 blah. Upon expiration of the 20-year restrictive license, the government has government purpose rights. So if you want to look up what is government purpose rights, look into it. It's 20 years, which is a lifetime when it comes to a lot of bleeding edge technology development. The other thing I do want to point out too is whenever you do apply for this program, you tell us which things we call them data assertions. What are the things you've already developed out of pocket, which then do not become subject to those data rights? It's only that which is developed during the course of that government work. So anyway, 11.5 of that solicitation that's open right now, and I'm sure there's a litany of information that's available on SBIR data rights out there as well.
We have a few folks joining that are international. What's the opportunity for international firms in the AFWERX challenge process, and if any, for SBIR?
So anyone can enter, anyone that's part of America or an allied country can enter the AFWERX challenge process. However, there are different restrictions on the SBIR process.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as we mentioned, for eligibility with SBIR and STTR, it's 50% minimum US owned and controlled, right? And so that means that there's nothing that precludes foreign investment or foreign participation. Now there is nuance there. So the origin of the funding does matter. The origin of the individual that's proposing to do some type of work on the effort does matter, and the type of work that they're doing. So normally you'll hear the term ITAR, whether or not a particular piece of work is controlled for the export of that information or that product to anywhere outside of the US. Information is an important one, right? Because if you have an employee who was working overseas and there was information that was leaving the company to them, that can be exported under ITAR, right? And so we as an open topic do not say all of our topics are ITAR controlled. Rather, because it's open, we can't do that. And when it comes time for that individual phase 2 award where you're prototyping, where you're developing, an assessment is made about whether or not it should be, right? So it kind of depends is the answer, but the general eligibility requirement is that majority US owned and controlled.
And then Steve, real quick, do you mind talking to the, there's a question, if they're greater than 50% VC owned, can they still apply for SBIR?
Really good question. So there is in the policy directive, it talks about an exemption to a rule that says no companies that are greater than 50% VCOC, so it includes venture capital, hedge fund, and similar. If they're greater than 50% VCOC owned, then they are not eligible. But if we invoke this exception, then up to 15% of the SBIR budget may be spent on those that are greater than 50% owned. So long story short is we have not invoked this exception in 20.3, the current cycle that's open right now. Our intention is to in 21.1, the very next cycle, but that will really depend on if we can get it through or not. If it is invoked and you as a majority VCOC owned company would like to apply and are going to be eligible, it will be mentioned directly in the solicitation. So once those instructions post, you will see very visibly if you can or cannot.
And we do have a few questions coming in about templates and what resources are available to guide interested firms through the processes for SBIR. So we do have resources available. There is a private sector on the afworks.af.mil website. There is a private sector section that lists SBIR, walks through the step-by-step process and has links to resources. So we absolutely advise checking that out, whether you're interested in this upcoming cycle or for the future. We also have a specific page that offers a checklist and an email subscription where you can receive resources and information and reminders throughout the processes. And that's this afworkslearning.com that's posted in the chat. Thanks for reposting that, Shaw. So if you go to that website, you will get notifications for the SBIR STTR process, but also for challenges and any of the other business opportunities that come up through the Air Force. So we do send out templates, examples of successful SBIR submissions, etc. So that's a great way to get that information. I want to go back in to some of the questions that were posted earlier that are specific to the challenge, Heather. And can you just calm our fears? Is there any such thing as applying to the wrong challenge area?
Actually, yes. So if you, the first submission criteria that you'll be evaluated on is relevance. So if you apply to the wrong topic area, then the evaluators are going to mark your topic as they're just going to remove your topic. And they're not going to move it to another topic. They're just going to mark it basically as a 0. So please make sure that you read each challenge topic and the call fully, and that you apply to the one that you are that you fit into, and that you are addressing all of the submission criteria for it. Because if you don't, then you risk being evaluated improperly.
Can companies apply to more than one?
Yes. And again, remembering that you do have submission criteria to follow, and that relevance is the first one. Make sure that you are addressing all of the things for a particular challenge. So that means that if you're applying to multiple challenge, then you must have your submission be substantially different for each, because each of the challenges are substantially different from each other.
And I think we've said a couple of times that the information today, if it's useful in helping people to refine or to adjust their submissions, that if you've already applied, you can do that. Can you give us more information on how to go about updating a proposal?
So you can go into your already submitted solution, and you have the option to turn it back into to draft. So you just do that on AFWERXchallenge.com. If you have any issues with doing that, then feel free to contact our technical support.
Great. And I'm scrolling through, again, the list of questions, and we've got a few that are a bit specific. Pitch days. For the Afworks team, can you tell us what's happening with pitch days? I hear that there will be 3 in the next year. Is that right?
I am not sure what they mean about pitch days. If they're talking about the people that are selected after evaluations, then the event prior to the showcase where the selected people from our evaluations will need to do their next level of face-to-face evaluations, then those pitches, those demonstrations in front of evaluators will be likely the week before the showcase event, and it will be, it will depend entirely on how many submissions we have, how many days there will be.
And that's so the energy challenge.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Zoe, will there be pitch days through AFRL? What other pitch days should folks anticipate coming up?
Yeah, so there are a few pitch days, and I don't have the exact dates for all of them. Steve, I don't know if you actually ended up grabbing those, but there's, I believe, 5 in this upcoming year, and they're all currently in the 20.3 solicitation. 2 of them are phase 1 pitch days, and so you'll see them. These are, just to be clear, these are separate from the open topic. So if you apply to the open topic, you are not applying for a pitch day. You're applying to go through, that phase 1, phase 2 process that is all within the open topic. If you'd like to apply to a pitch day, there's specific topics for pitch days. So that's actually something new that we haven't done before. And you'll see one of those is just in your traditional Air Force BAA. So that's the weapons pitch day. We have a Space Force pitch day, which is, it's a CSO, but it starts out as a phase 1, and then you'll pitch for a phase 2 at the end of that 3-month period of performance of the phase 1. And then I believe there's 2 or 3 other pitch days that are happening, and those are all direct to phase 2. So I know there's a lot going on. We're trying out some new things this round to see what works. So the direct to phase 2 pitch days, unlike the phase 1 where you would go through a phase 1 and then find a customer and then pitch at the pitch day, the direct to phase 2 kind of starts you out right, pitching at the pitch day for that phase 2 proposal. I believe they're all $750K, but you'll have to check in the solicitation for the specifics. And I believe if you look on the DSIP website, if you go to Air Force, the CSOs under, the Air Force topics, then you'll be able to see all of those. And there's instructions. There should be instructions specifically for the pitch days, and those will look different depending on the pitch days because they're run by different organizations. So these are not run by AFWERX. They're not run by AFVentures. They're run by specific organizations. And so, digital engineering is run by that PEO, Space Force is running the Space Pitch Day, and so on.
So yeah, Zoe, that was brilliant. I think you covered pretty much all that. I'll recap the ones that I'm tracking. Weapons Pitch Day, I think, is March of 2021. Space is March of 2021. RSO and Simulator, I think, are to be determined, 2 separate pitch days there. And then Digital Engineering is planned for January 21, I believe. But I want to kind of more broad strokes here. Anyone who's engaged with Pitch Day before, your understanding of it will either be New York City Pitch Day, which was a year and a half ago at this point, where you were vying for phase 1, small dollar contracts with certain customers that were involved. Or it was one of our traditional phase 2 pitch days where you were in this big bucket of phase 1 with the open topic. And from that, you were specializing towards a certain customer group with the pitch day. And what Zoe described is kind of the model that's being experimented with now of that direct to phase 2 model, where it's saying, look, you aren't already in the phase 1 population, but anyone is eligible to try for this direct to phase 2 pitch day construct. So we'll see how that works. In general, I would expect to start seeing what we call centralized pitch days, or once per cycle having a really big pitch day that does have some big theme that is it's bringing in many stakeholders to help to fund and gain traction and excitement around the event, as well as what we call franchised pitch days. And that's where many of them that we just discussed are other organizations running their own efforts with a chunk of SBIR funds. So anyway, more to come on that, but do check out the solicitation itself, where you will see independent instructions for each of those pitch days that Zoe mentioned.
And then the last thing I would add is, just because you're applying for a pitch day doesn't mean you can't also apply for the open topic. And so, the pitch day will typically have a lower rate of acceptance. It'll be a little bit more competitive. And so there's nothing stopping you from applying to both, especially for those phase 1 pitch days. The application probably looks very similar to the phase 1 open topic. So don't rule that out. There's nothing that says you can't, apply to both or multiple.
We have questions about odds, and I wanted to ask both programs here to speak to application numbers and the rate that are typically accepted. And I know that question was asked earlier, Heather. How many proposals or applications does AFWERX Challenge typically receive? What are you expecting for energy?
So every challenge is different. So far, we've received around 300 applications across all of the energy challenges. And generally, we take between 15 and 20% of all of the submissions through each phase. Like for every round, we go to like 15 to 20%. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely expecting a large turnout, a large number of people for this particular challenge. For Base of the Future, which was our last one around this size, we had like over 2,000 submissions. So yeah, so we're expecting something similar to that.
And any advice for this attendee who's asking how to set themselves up for success in terms of getting on stage?
In order to be selected, make sure that you really read the challenge, pay attention to what they are looking for, and write your submission to think of it as a job interview. Read the posting and write your submission to that posting. Like think of it as if it's stuffed with keywords, and like turn it back around. And I mean, of course you need to deliver on this, but I mean, we're asking for very specific things, and give us those specific things and you'll get on stage.
So to the AFWERX team, similar questions. What are the application rates like for the SBIR phase 1 process? How many are you likely to award, and any advice on what makes for a successful submission?
Yeah, really great question. So, I don't, and Zoe, correct me if I'm being too conservative, we can't release the exact numbers, but I will say it's broken 1,000 for the regularly now for the phase 1 applications. So pretty competitive there. As I mentioned, the goal is roughly each round 300 to 400 or so awards. So that would, say 30 to 40% unless there's greatly more than 1,000 applications. The vector is up and to the right, so it's hard to predict in the future what we're going to see. And then for the phase 2, again, I wouldn't be surprised if 1,000 is broken. And so that is competitive as well. And a lot of it depends on resources available too, as it always does. And so one of the projects that we are working now is transparency and metrics. We think the metrics tell a really good story, but we want to make sure that we are clear to release the things that we want to. Ultimately, that's going to be released this fall to our website. So stay tuned on that for that and many other metrics that I think are pretty telling of the narrative. Over.
Are you willing to talk about the timeline of what a company can expect if they apply for SBIR, say from proposal to getting their first check?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So let's play out the process, right? So opens on September 23rd, which has passed, closes for submissions on October 22nd. You will see in the solicitation that in this current one, it's written as 60 days for phase ones for award as a target expectation and 90 days for phase twos off that direct to phase two proposal. Again, that's in each solicitation, they're going to talk about the expectations that we would set. In general, Dr. Roper has communicated in some kind of outwardly public meetings that 60 days is a target for both of those categories. So expect to see us continue to optimize towards meeting that goal. And then when it comes to your first payment after the award is made, it really depends on how you structure your contract, right? In most cases, we'll see the first milestone being delivered, which triggers the ability to pay within the first month. Some kind of kickoff meeting or whatever that might be, right? And so let's say 15 days after that, you've got your first deliverable is complete and approved. Then who actually makes the payments, at least at this point, is DFAS, which has a net plus 30 expectation, which means within 30 days of that approval of the invoice, the payment will hit your bank account. So, you know, you can kind of do the math of the 60, 15, and then 30 for the minimum as that notional example. But again, it really depends on how you structure the contracts. And I also want to say that having such an influx of applicants and awardees has at some point created choke points in the system. I think we've got a pathway to alleviate those pretty effectively. But at the same time, the target is the target, and we're going to do our best to hit it. And if we don't, we'll be transparent as to why. Over.
We're coming about to the close of today's session, and there has been a lot of information shared. I'm wondering if there are any, based on your programs, any topics that we haven't covered that you really feel we should be speaking to. I know you've both been perusing through the questions that are being asked, but is there anything that you just really want to share with attendees right now while we have them on the line? Sarah, let's start with you.
Oh, sorry. So from the challenge perspective, from like people are asking a lot of questions about, should I submit this? Should I submit this? I have this solution that, so my suggestion is read through the challenge. If you still have any questions, email me. I'll drop my email in the chat. And but the worst case scenario is submit it. Like find the thing that fits the closest and submit, because we may not have known to look for that. So worst case scenario is it doesn't go through, but or the best case scenario is we found out about a solution we didn't know that was out there.
I think the AFWERX team would echo that same remark around the open topic. What other information do you think is important to share in our last few minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. So afworks.af.mil/SBIR. Check out that. It has videos. It has that focus area document that Zoe talked about. It has kind of walkthrough breakdown of the process. It also links you to a sign-up form for an Ask Me Anything, which is going to be October 9th. Is that right, Zoe? Okay. So October 9th is the next one. As I mentioned, October 22nd is when we close, so it gives you a few weeks before that happens. But definitely tune in if you have any questions. We will ask and answer for everyone, just as we've done here. And beyond that, I'm really excited to see some great applications come through, and thanks for your time. Zoe, over to you.
The plugs. Zoe, will you plug again the importance of the 9th and the 22nd of October?
Yeah, so the 9th is our last AMA. So it's our third one. If you missed the first two, you can actually find recordings of those in the same part of the website that Steve just mentioned. So you might want to look at those to see what questions have been answered, so you can ask different questions, as this will be the last time we kind of pull everyone together to answer those. And then the 22nd. And the one plug I would make, everything Steve said, but also submit early. Do not submit your proposal on the 22nd. We obviously operate on government systems that are probably not to your standard, you know, as industry. And so they glitch, they have issues with large amounts of data being inputted into them. And so if you submit early, you're better off. Even, you know, 3 or 4 days before the 22nd, make your first submission. You can always go and update it later on. But if you wait till the last minute, we constantly see people who just don't get their thing in, you know, the system's frozen, it won't accept their proposal or something like that because there's such an influx. And there's no way that we can evaluate that proposal. We can't take it into consideration when we're making awards. And that's, you know, that's kind of heartbreaking in a way, but there's nothing that we can do about it. So I would say submit early, and you can always update that later on if you want to. But the 9th and the 22nd are kind of your big dates currently.
And we'll be sure to, again, share the resources and the websites in a follow-up email to attendees. I think another thing is to go to that AFWERX Learning. If Shaw, you could post that link again in the chat. That gives you a quick checklist of important things like getting your government registration numbers, like your cage code and your DUNS number, well ahead of time, so that you're not ineligible to apply simply because you haven't checked a couple of the boxes that just are to register your business with the government. So there are a few quick tips that can really save a lot of heartburn later on. Heather, I wanted to ask you for the same recap of the plugs for the challenges. I know the really important date for this group is if you're interested in resubmitting, fine-tuning your proposal, that the deadline for that is the 15th?
Yes, so the challenge closes on October 15th, and we have 2 webinars coming up on October 2nd and October 12th that are other Ask Me Anythings about challenge questions. So if you have any submission issues, any other questions about what the challenge is looking for, things like that, those are on the 2nd and the 13th.
Great. Again, we encourage everyone to take advantage of those upcoming webinars as well, to keep your questions coming in. You know, it's meant to be that this is a friendly process for innovators and for potential partner suppliers. Our interest is in you know, having the most high potential companies see the opportunity to work with the Air Force as a partner of choice. And that's exactly what the premise of hosting these events are. So I want to thank Heather for making sure that the Energy Challenge is clear and is readily accessible, and then to Zoe and Steve to shedding some light on additional funding opportunities and connections to customer discovery that are possible through the AFWERX team. So thank you to all of you. Again, to all of our attendees, we'll be sharing as much of the information as we possibly can for what you heard both in this segment and in the earlier segment. We are at a close for our event today, and we want to make sure just to thank everyone on behalf of AFWERX and our team at Established. We wish you all the best of luck with this, and we can't wait to be telling the moonshot stories 3, 5, and 10 years from now. So thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today. And with that, we'll see all the AFWERX team at the next big event. Thanks, everyone, and thanks to our other panelists who hung on the line. Have a great day, everyone.